The summer I turned 9, my family took me to a giant indoor water park, the kind with looping slides, fake palm trees, and a hotel that smelled like wet carpet and sunscreen. It was supposed to be the best trip ever. My little sister was still too young for the big rides, so Mom promised I could go down the tallest slide by myself. All day, the echo of screaming kids and rushing water bounced off the tile walls. After dinner, Dad fell asleep watching TV, and Mom took my sister for ice cream. I was finally old enough to explore the arcade on my own. The game room was half lit, machines humming and blinking, the sounds muffled by thick hotel carpet. I was beating the high score on an old racing game when I noticed someone standing behind me, a man, maybe in his late 30s, wearing a faded blue polo and khakis. He watched me play for a full minute before speaking. He asked if I wanted a trick to win more tickets. I shrugged, not wanting to be rude. He said he could show me a secret machine in the basement hallway, one most kids didn't know about. For a split second, I was curious, but my stomach nodded. My parents' warnings about strangers echoed in my ears. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. His voice was quiet. "You seem really smart. I bet you could win the big prize if you come with me." I mumbled something about going to find my mom and bolted, pushing through the blur of kids until I reached the elevator. Back in the room, I locked myself in the bathroom. I could still hear his words, soft and sticky in the back of my mind. That night, every hotel shadow looked stretched and strange. From the window, I saw the man in the parking lot below, circling a silver car, looking up at the building. I crawled into my parents' bed and didn't tell them why I was shaking. I felt like a kid pretending not to be afraid of the dark, but the dark that night felt real and enlivened. I couldn't shake the feeling that the stranger was still somewhere nearby, waiting for kids who might not be as lucky. Now the next morning, I tried to tell myself I'd imagined it, the man, the parking lot, the uneasy feeling that clung to my skin like chlorine. The water park was loud with laughter and shouts, sunlight pouring through huge windows. It was supposed to be safe. Still, I kept glancing over my shoulder, half expecting that blue polo to appear in the crowd. I didn't say a word to my parents. I was scared they'd be mad or worse, disappointed that I wasn't brave enough to handle a little freedom. When I went back to the arcade after lunch, the man was there again, standing near the prize counter, pretending to watch other kids. He caught my eye and gave a small wave, like we were friends with a secret. My heart hammered. I turned and ran, ducking into the women's locker room and hiding in a bathroom stall until the noise of the games felt safely far away. All afternoon, ordinary things felt different. The lazy river felt too slow and wide, the lifeguards suddenly too busy. I looked for my parents everywhere, needing to see their faces to steady myself. Sunburned families crowded every corner, but I couldn't shake the idea that I was the only one being watched. At dinner, I barely ate. Mom asked if I was feeling sick. I shrugged, afraid if I opened my mouth, the truth would spill out. That night, I pressed my face to the window quietly, watching the parking lot as it filled with headlights. At first it looked empty, just cars and the flicker of pool lights in the dark. Then, on a bench beneath a dim lamp, I saw the man sitting, still in his blue polo, head tilted up toward the hotel rooms. He stared for a long time, as if searching the rows of windows for someone who hadn't been caught yet. I slid out of sight and tried to breathe quietly. The noise of the water slides echoed up from the pool long after midnight, twisting into dreams where someone was always a step behind. That trip was supposed to be about fun, a water park, a hotel, a little freedom. But after the stranger, none of it felt safe again. The last day was supposed to be the best. One more morning in the pool, pancakes in the hotel restaurant, then home. I begged off the slides, telling Dad I was tired. Just couldn't stand the idea of being out of their sight. I stuck close at breakfast, feeling a little silly, but not enough to let go of Mom's hand. While we packed up, Mom realized she'd left my sister's toy in the arcade. She handed me the room key and asked me to grab it. That hallway felt longer than before, every footstep echoing off slick tile and glass. The arcade was empty, still worried with leftover electricity and game lights. I rushed to the air hockey table where the toy sat, then heard footsteps behind me. When I turned, the man was standing at the entrance. He'd changed shirts, a pastel stripe instead of the blue, but his eyes were the same, fixed on me. My heart raced so loudly I could hardly breathe. He stepped forward, blocking the only way out. Shouldn't be alone, he said, his voice so normal it made my skin crawl. Let's find your parents. Put his hand on my shoulder as if to steer me. But I pulled away as hard as I could, clutching my sister's toy like a life preserver. For a split second, I froze. But then behind him, I saw a hotel worker coming out of a supply room. I screamed not words, just the kind of scream that gets adults running. The man let go, stepping back, smile melting from his face. The worker asked what was wrong, and the man put his hands up, muttering he was just trying to help. I lied and said I was lost, but my eyes must have said otherwise. The worker kept himself between me and the man as I hurried out. All I remember is sprinting down the hall, stomach twisting. I don't know where the man went. I only know that after I shoved into our hotel room, shaking and breathless, I started sobbing before I could explain what had happened. This time, I told my parents everything. Hotel security searched the arcade and parking lot, but said the stranger was already gone. By lunchtime, we were driving away, the hotel shrinking in the rear view, my parents trying to distract me with music and snacks. But through the window, I watched every face in passing cars, wondering how many other kids at the water park that weekend had been spared. Or if, like me, their trip would always feel changed by the shadow of someone watching. Every job has its hazards, but when you're a delivery driver, you get used to the weird and petty ones. Barking dogs, awkward doorbell moments, the occasional angry customer over a late pizza. What I wasn't prepared for was the feeling of being hunted. It started on a Wednesday rain slicking the streets, everything gray and blurred through my van's windshield. I was running my usual mid-morning route, nothing out of the ordinary until I noticed a guy standing on the corner near my first drop-off. Something about him felt off. He wore a faded jacket, a baseball cap pulled low, hands sunk deep into his pockets. He watched as I carried a package to the door, and when I got back into the van, he was still there, eyes following me. That in itself wasn't too strange city life and all. But 2 stops later, I saw him again, standing by a newsstand, head tilted in my direction. My mind started rationalizing. Maybe he lived nearby. Maybe I was being paranoid. But by the 4th stop, there was no denying it. He was there, pretending to tie his shoe, staring. My hand started to shake on the steering wheel. By lunchtime, I was making an effort to look casual, acting like the route was just routine, but my skin prickled with every turn. Each address felt like a test. Was he there again? Would he still be watching? A cold sweat stuck to my shirt as I tried to figure out if I should call someone, or if I'd sound crazy complaining about a guy standing on the sidewalk. But I kept going. It was my job, after all. I wasn't going to let some random stranger scare me off the clock. By the time the afternoon deliveries rolled around, I started changing my routine, doubling back to see if anyone was following, skipping non-urgent stops, eyes glued to my mirrors. But no matter what I did, there he was. Sometimes across the street, sometimes lurking behind parked cars. Always close enough for me to feel his presence, never close enough to actually confront. At one stop, I pulled into a cul-de-sac and saw him at the far end, leaning on a lamppost. He didn't even pretend this time. I just stood there watching. When I walked up to the house, pretending not to notice, the customer woman in her robe looked out past me and stiffened. "Do you know that man?" she whispered. I shook my head. She locked her door before I'd even made it back to my van. That's when the panic really set in. Every little sound, the slap of my boots on wet pavement, the distant rumble of thunder felt sharper, heavier. I kept checking my phone, thinking about calling the police or the dispatch office. But what would I even say? He hasn't done anything. It's just ... watching. During a stop near the end of my shift, I saw him standing next to a cluster of mailboxes. I decided, in a moment of reckless bravado, to circle back on foot instead of just driving away. I kept my distance, trying to look busy checking a package, and watched as he pretended to leaf through junk mail that definitely wasn't his. His eyes flicked up and met mine. I felt cold all over, like his gaze peeled something private away from me. I talked to dispatch and the police finally, after a few restless nights, reporting the stalking. They said they'd keep an eye out, but without proof, there was little they could do. The company gave me pepper spray, some safety tips, and told me to call if anything happened again, but the worry didn't leave me. The whole experience changed how I saw my job, the streets, even the people I passed every day. No matter how busy or ordinary the city seemed, I always felt like someone might be watching, waiting for the next delivery, the next step. The fear never entirely went away, but I learned to carry it with me, a quiet warning beneath the hum of the van's engine. After I reported the situation to both the company and the police, their responses started slow, but eventually became more serious as the encounters escalated. The company gave me some basic safety gear pepper spray, advice on staying in well-lit areas, and suggestions to work with a partner when possible. They also told me they would look into the matter and keep an eye on the deliveries in that neighborhood. The police were polite but cautious at first, without direct evidence or a clear threat. They said their hands were tied. But they did file a report and increase patrols in the area. They told me to call immediately if anything suspicious happened again, trying to reassure me even as I knew my fear wasn't going away. I never thought a simple weekend hike through Sankawi would turn into something I'd carry with me forever. My boyfriend and I, just two New Mexican souls, craving sunshine, jaw-dropping mesa views, and a little ancient history hit that 1.5-mile loop trail, one bright Saturday morning in late March. The air was crisp, the volcanic tuff warmed under our boots, and the soft sun highlighted the petroglyphs carved into cliff faces. The National Park Service describes Tonkawi as an unexcavated relic of the ancestral pueblos, with paths worn deep into the rocks sometimes, sandpaper sharp under your calves if you wear shorts. Alongside cave dwellings and tailless pueblos, I was leading the way, reaching into my pack for an extra bottle of water when I spotted him. A man mid-30s maybe, lean, wearing a dark jacket, but no day pack. He stood partly hidden behind a cluster of sagebrush, just off the trail, watching us. At first I thought he was another hiker taking a break, but he wasn't on the trail. He had no gear, no water bottle, nothing. My heart pinged, but I figured maybe he was lost. Maybe local land. I waved. "Hey," I said, voice light. "You okay?" He tilted his head slightly, like a dog assessing something unfamiliar. He said nothing, just stared. My boyfriend, Scott, glanced at me. I shrugged and we continued, exchanging uneasy looks. For maybe 20 minutes we hiked the worn path further into the mesa loop. Soon we were past the caves near the ladder where you climb down to the other side. That's when I heard a footstep behind me like a twig snapped, not mechanical, but deliberate. I turned, but didn't see him. Scott looked too, but nothing. The sun dipped lower, long shadows curled across the trail, and the petroglyphs turned stark. Before we reached the next bench overlook, I heard him again across the path, footsteps shadowing ours at exactly our pace. I stopped mid-sentence. I turned around slowly. There he was, again craning forward, pure stillness except for his tight grip around something. Was it gloves? Or his own hands? It's hard to recall. That same blank stare. No pack, no bottle, no trail logic. "Scott, someone's behind us," I hissed. He whispered, "Let's pass him." And we stepped aside. I managed a weak morning, half-hearted. He just exhaled and let us by. I thought we'd lost him, but the air seemed to thicken like, when the breeze dies and the woods go quiet. By the time we reached the loop's far side and began to descend alongside the cliff's edge, my chest thundered. I kept glancing over my shoulder, and there he was again, maybe 50 feet behind. Walking the same descent, directly mirroring us. I tapped Scott and whispered, "He's following." He used his phone to check reception and said, "We can't hike out past him. Should we go back?" My stomach twisted. The trail loop winds you around the mesa, but to return, we'd have to pass him again. I felt foolish, thinking maybe I was paranoid, but intuition roared, "Something is wrong." So I turned, took his photograph with zoom, blurry but enough to show face, hoping that if we happened to need help later, we could show rangers. He saw the flash from my camera lens and froze. Then he stepped off the trail into the shadows, vanished behind giant tuff formations, blending into natural ruin. That moment, the trail, the scrub, the ancient stones felt like characters in my nightmare. I had studied that place earlier, read how Sankowi's paths were carved by ancient feet, its caves blackened from centuries of fire, and how the place seemed serene until you stopped noticing the silence. But I'd never considered that another living human, someone alive in the present, could warp it entirely. "Let's keep moving," I said, voice low. "But we stick close. Stay visible." We pressed on, hearts loud in the quiet desert afternoon. We moved faster than before, but not enough to make it look like we were running. It was like trying to outwalk a shadow without letting it know you saw it. Scott stayed just a step behind me, glancing over his shoulder every few seconds. I didn't want to turn again. I already knew he was back there. I could feel him. You ever get that sensation that someone's eyes are drilling into the back of your skull? That's what it felt like his stare was clinging to me, sticky and silent. The sun was dropping quick now. I hadn't realized how late it had gotten. I remember thinking how stupid we were for not bringing flashlights. Even more stupid for not turning back the moment he stepped off that trail and disappeared into the rock. But I didn't want to act afraid. I didn't want to admit out loud how wrong everything felt, as if saying it would somehow give it more power. The trail narrowed again. On one side was the soft drop of the mesa, and on the other, a natural rock wall dotted with black soot from ancient fires. We squeezed through, the sandstone pressing in. I remember ducking under a jagged outcrop just before Scott whispered, "He's back." I stopped. "What do you mean?" He's following again closer. Same spot behind us, same distance. He didn't look at me when he said it, just kept staring ahead. His voice was level but low, and I could tell by how tight he held his jaw that he was trying not to panic. I dared to glance back. He was closer now, just maybe 30 feet away. Still not saying a word, not speeding up, just keeping pace. Still no backpack, still no gear, no reason to be here. And the way he looked at us, it wasn't curious or confused or even threatening in the usual way. It was, I don't know, intent? Hungry, maybe? Not in the physical way, but like we were something he'd decided he needed to be near. I remember gripping my phone so hard it hurt. I had one bar now, just one. Enough to maybe call for help if we got up the trail another 100 feet. So I called 911. I didn't even care if it was overreacting. I hit the number and pressed the speaker to my ear. No dial tone, just that hollow silence that means you're nowhere close to a tower. "No signal," I muttered. Still nothing. Scott whispered, "He's still coming." So we started moving again. Fast, but not running. I glanced down a side path, barely a deer trail, twisting between volcanic boulders where old dwellings collapsed centuries ago. For a half-second, I thought about ducking into it, hiding, but that felt worse. If we turned off the main trail, he could trap us, or corner us. And there would be no one else. Sinkawi is not a busy loop, especially late in the day. We hadn't seen another soul since that first half-mile. I saw the wooden ladder ahead. I nearly cried. It was the final descent point, the steepest part of the trail, about 15 feet down, carved rungs into a cutout in the rock wall. Once we were down that, it was a flat half-mile back to the trailhead and our car. "Scott, let me go first." I didn't argue. I climbed down fast, boots slipping a little on the dusty rungs. I turned once I hit the ground, waiting, heart in my throat. Scott followed. He was halfway down when I saw movement at the top of the ladder. The man stood at the rim just watching. The wind shifted his dark jacket, and I noticed something I hadn't before. He was barefoot. His feet were dark, dusty, like he'd been walking for hours, maybe days. And his eyes, they weren't blank anymore. They were furious. He didn't say anything. He didn't climb down. He just watched as Scott dropped beside me and grabbed my arm. "Go," he whispered. And we did. We ran. I've never run like that before. Full sprint, not looking back. Hearing our own breath louder than the gravel under our boots. My calves burned, my lungs stung. But the image of him just standing there silent and furious hit every nerve in my body on fire. We didn't stop until we saw the car. I yanked the keys from Scott's pocket, fumbled with the unlock, and we both slammed the doors behind us, like that thin metal could protect us from whatever he was. The trailhead was empty. Not another vehicle in sight. No rangers, no hikers. It's just the fading sun and that long stretch of dirt road leading out toward Route 4. I turned the car on, locked the doors, sat for a moment, both of us shaking. Then I looked up. I swear to God he was standing on the ridge above the trailhead, just high enough to watch. Still silent, staring. We didn't wait. I threw the car into reverse so hard we almost hit a rock I hadn't seen, and then sped down the dirt road like we were escaping a fire. Dust shot up behind us, the kind that clings to your windows for days. My knuckles were white on the wheel. And Scott kept turning around in his seat like he expected to see the guy sprinting after us like something out of a nightmare. But there was nothing. just that empty, orange-tinged desert behind us. Neither of us spoke for a while. The only sound was the rattle of the tires on the washboard road and the dull hum of the radio. Still stuck on static from earlier when we tried to get a signal, my heart was still pounding in my ears. Every corner of my body was alive with that wired. The jittery sensation that only comes after real fear, like when the adrenaline keeps pumping long after the danger's gone. You're not sure if you're going to cry or throw up. When we finally hit the paved section of Route 4 again, I pulled over just long enough to breathe, drink water, and try calling someone. Anyone. My sister answered on the first ring. "You okay?" she said. "You sound weird." I started to laugh and couldn't stop. Came out hollow and shaky and way too loud, and Scott reached over and gently took the phone from me. "Hey," he said. "It's me. We're okay, but we need to talk to someone. Maybe the Rangers, or police." That's when it hit me. What would we even tell them? We weren't hurt. We weren't technically threatened. No crime had been committed. A guy followed us, acted weird. Didn't speak, that was it. That's all we had. Blurry photo and a bad feeling. But something about it, something deeper than just being followed. It felt wrong. He hadn't just stumbled on us by accident. He wasn't hiking. He wasn't there for nature or solitude or the caves. He was watching. From the moment we got there. From the moment we stepped foot on the trail. Back in town, we stopped at the ranger station near the Bandelier Visitor Center. I pulled up the blurry photo on my phone and told the story to a young woman behind the desk. She listened, eyes narrowing at the right places, nodding quietly, but when I finished, she just said, "You're not the first." My blood went cold. "What do you mean?" I asked. She glanced behind her, then leaned forward a bit, lowering her voice. "We've had a few reports like this over the years. Not often, but enough. People say they see someone watching them. A man. Doesn't talk, doesn't engage, just follows. Same description every time. Dark clothes, no gear, silent." I blinked. "So who is he?" She hesitated. "No one knows. Some think it's just a local guy, maybe unwell. Others, well, there are stories." Scott folded his arms. "What kind of stories?" She hesitated again, then sighed. "Old ones. Some people say he's not alive, that he's been there since the war. Those say he's even older than that, like something left behind. St. Louis was part of the ancestral lands. People lived and died and disappeared up there for centuries. Some elders believe a spirit guards that loop, or maybe it's just energy." I wanted to laugh, I really did, but I couldn't, because I remembered his eyes, those hollow, furious eyes that had locked with mine, and I wasn't sure if I'd ever believe he was just a man. She took down our report, said she'd pass it to the Rangers, thanked us for letting her know. But she didn't sound surprised. Not once. That rattled me more than anything. That night I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that ridge, saw his shape standing there, unmoving, watching. Scott dozed off sometime after midnight, curled toward the wall, but I just lay there, listening, imagining footsteps outside the window. Shadows shifting beyond the curtains. A hand pressed to the glass. Around 2:13 a.m., I got a notification on my phone. Motion detected at the front door camera. My breath caught. I tapped it open. It was a glitch. Had to be. The image was dark, grainy just, the porch light throwing long shadows. But there was something at the edge of the frame. Shape. A figure. Too tall to be Scott. Too thin. Barefoot. Standing there. Still silent. I didn't go to the window. I didn't call out, I just watched the screen. Prayed it was just my mind playing tricks. But deep down, I knew he had found us. I didn't wake Scott. I couldn't. Something about saying it out loud, or someone outside, would have made it too real. Instead, I sat there in the blue-white glow of my phone, replaying the footage again and again, fingers trembling on the screen. Every time I paused it, the figure looked like it had shifted just slightly. A blur of shadow, an outline that didn't belong. At 2:28 a.m., the camera stopped detecting motion. Nothing triggered it again. I waited until the sky outside turned the faintest shade of lavender, and the birds began their static chirp morning songs before I dared to move. I crept to the window, slowly pulling the curtain back just enough to see the front yard. Nothing. No prints in the gravel. No shadow. No signs of anything out of place. Except the porch light was off. I always leave it on. Scott stirred when I got back into bed. "You okay?" "Couldn't sleep," I said. "Weird dreams?" I didn't tell him about the camera. Not right then. Told myself I'd imagined it. Or maybe it was a cat or a trick of the light or something explainable. But the next morning I opened the app again. The footage was gone. Deleted. Not failed to save, not corrupted, just gone. The whole clip. No trace it ever existed. Like I hallucinated it. Except I didn't. I know I didn't. That week I tried to get back to normal. I went to work, pretended to laugh at texts, scrolled through social media like my brain wasn't fraying at the edges. Scott noticed. Of course he did. "Yeah, been the same," he said more than once. "It was just some guy, a creep. We got away. It's over." I wanted to believe that. God, I wanted to. But things started happening. Small things at first. Like every time I parked somewhere, I felt like someone was sitting in a car nearby. Engine running, watching. My name was written wrong on my coffee cup at the drive-thru. Kate was spelled with a C, which never happens. And then, one night, Scott swore he heard someone knock on the back door. 3 slow knocks, measured like they weren't trying to get in. It's just reminding us they were there. We checked the cameras. Nothing. Dead zones, both front and back. Just static for a 5-minute window. We upgraded the Wi-Fi, reset everything, but it kept happening. Always between 2 and 3 a.m. one night, I had a dream. I think it felt real. In it, I was back at Sankawai, standing on the carved trail. But everything was silent. No wind, no birds, no sound at all. The sky was dark. Not night, but some strange in-between. He was there. At the top of the ladder, not moving. Just watching me from above. Eyes sunken like they'd never closed. Mouth twisted into something. Not quite a smile. Not quite human. He lifted his hand and pointed downward. Not at me. Past me. And then I woke up. Sweating, freezing, heart pounding like a drum in my ears. Scott was still asleep. I went to the living room to splash water on my face. As I passed the hallway, I noticed something. The front door deadbolt still locked. Chain latch unhooked. I never leave it unlatched. I stood there, frozen, staring at the loose chain swinging slightly like it had just been touched. That was when I started checking the closets. The attic, under the bed. Every night. I didn't know what I was looking for. I only knew I'd never felt alone since that hike. Not for a second. Even when no one was around, I felt watched. Like some part of me hadn't left the mesa, like he hadn't either. I started researching. I didn't tell Scott not at first because he'd already labeled this as stress, or trauma, or overreaction. But something inside me knew better. There was a pattern here, a shape just under the surface, and I needed to name it. If I could just understand what we saw, maybe I could explain why I couldn't shake the feeling that he was still with us. I started with news articles. Missing persons, strange incidents on the Sankawi Trail. The archives were thin, but there were stories subtle, buried, forgotten. I started with news articles. Missing persons, strange incidents on the Sankawi Trail. The archives were thin, but there were stories, subtle, buried, forgotten. In 2009, a man went missing from that trail. Left his car in the lot, never came back. In 2016, a couple reported a hostile local, stalking them on the mesa. But when they described him barefoot, no pack. Silent the Rangers claimed it didn't match anyone they'd ever encountered. No one was arrested. The report was quietly filed and never followed up. And then I found a comment buried in a travel blog from 2018. Did anyone else see the barefoot guy on the trail? Thought he was just weird until he followed me to my car? Didn't speak, didn't blink. Just stood there while I backed out. Still dream about him sometimes. That place is haunted. I stared at that sentence until my eyes burned. I wasn't crazy. I printed everything, pinned it to a corkboard like some detective. I even called the Los Alamos Historical Society, asking if they had any old stories tied to Sankawi oral histories, legends, anything. A woman named Helen called me back. Older voice. Steady, sharp. "People don't ask about Sankawi," she said. "Not like that. You lose things up there?" What kind of things? I asked. But you paused yourself. If you're not careful, dociously about our encounter. Left out the home stuff, the camera, the dream, just the trail, just the man. She didn't gasp or sound surprised. She just said, there's an old Tewa belief about watchers. Not spirits, not ghosts. Presences bound to a place. Not evil exactly, but not human either. They remember everything, see everything, and sometimes they follow. My throat went dry. Why follow? To remind you, she said, that you were somewhere you weren't meant to be. After I hung up, I sat in the dark, staring at the corkboard, and realized something bone-deep and horrible. That day on the trail, we saw him first. But what if he had seen us long before that? What if he'd chosen us? Later that week, Scott got a call from an unknown number. He didn't answer. No voicemail. A few minutes later, a text came through. You're not supposed to leave. No number attached. Just those 5 words. The timestamp. 2:12 a.m. I asked him if we should go to the police. He shook his head and tell them what? That we're being haunted by a barefoot ghost who uses Verizon. He was trying to joke. But I could see it in his eyes. He was scared. Same as me. We stopped hiking after that. Stopped going out at night. We even stayed at a hotel for a weekend just to get away, but it didn't help. I had another dream while we were there. Same mesa, same sky. This time, he was closer, reaching out. Hand pale, dirt under the nails, fingers long enough to wrap around my wrist twice. When I woke up, I had bruises. Thin, perfect lines on my forearm, like a grip that hadn't quite let go. That's when I knew. We hadn't just seen something strange out there. We'd brought something back. After the bruises showed up, things stopped feeling like paranoia and started feeling like proof. I took pictures, dated, time-stamped. I stared at them with a kind of numb terror, trying to convince myself I hadn't rolled over on something in my sleep or bumped into a door frame. But deep down, I already knew the truth. Something touched me in that dream. Something left a mark. I started sleeping with the lights on. Bought a motion sensor for the hallway. Every creak of the house sent my body into alert. Scott tried to stay strong, but I caught him double-checking the locks every night now. We stopped laughing. Even music sounded hollow in the background. Felt like we were living inside a pressure chamber, waiting for something to snap. One night I caught Scott just standing in the backyard at 3:30 a.m., barefoot in the grass, staring at the sky. I tapped on the window, calling his name. He didn't respond. I had to go out there in my robe, cold air crawling up my spine, and when I touched his arm, he flinched like I'd yanked him out of a trance. "What were you doing out here?" I asked. He blinked slowly, looked at me like he didn't recognize me for a second. "I don't know," he said. "I thought someone was calling me." We left the house the next day, packed a couple bags, booked a cheap Airbnb in Santa Fe, didn't tell anyone. I wanted to believe putting distance between us and that trail would help, that maybe whatever had attached itself to us would fade. But the first night in the Airbnb, I opened the closet in the bedroom and found a single, dirt-smeared footprint inside. Barefoot human, facing out. I fell back so hard I hit the nightstand. Scott ran in, saw the print, and didn't say a word. Just grabbed our bags and left the room. We didn't sleep there that night. We drove until sunrise and got breakfast at a roadside diner, both of us silent, hollow-eyed, chewing through ash. "I think we should go back," Scott said finally, "to Sankawi." I whispered. He nodded. "I don't think he's finished with us." I didn't argue. I knew he was right. We returned the next afternoon, parked in the same spot. That low hum of unease started the moment I shut the car door, like the air itself remembered us. The trail was empty, dead silent, not even a bird. We didn't speak as we climbed the ladder again, our boots slipping just a little more than they had that day. I half expected to see him at every turn, every rock, every shadow. But he wasn't there, not in the usual way. We stopped at the top of the mesa where we'd first spotted him. Wind was strong, whipping dust across the trail. The sun sat low, orange and burning. I turned in a slow circle and whispered, "We're sorry." Scott echoed me. We didn't mean to disrespect anything. Anyone. For a long time, nothing happened. Just the wind, just the heat on the rocks, and then everything stopped. Like someone sucked all the air out of the sky. No wind, no birds, no sound. The silence pressed down on us. My ears rang. The hairs on my arm stood straight up. I grabbed Scott's hand. Then I saw it. Carved into the soft, tough stone, just ahead on the path, a fresh footprint. Not ours. Deeper, larger, leading off the trail. And beside it, a second one, smaller. Mine. I hadn't walked there yet. I don't know how long I stood there, staring at those footprints. Mine and his. They weren't just in the dirt or the dust that could be brushed away with a boot scuff. They were carved into the tuff itself. Etched like petroglyphs, like they'd always been there, like we were meant to leave them. Scott said my name once, soft, almost like he didn't want to disturb whatever was happening around us. Kate, I knelt, touched the print that matched mine. It was smooth around the edges, as if worn by time, but there was no way it had been there before. We'd never walked that section. I hadn't even stepped in that direction yet. And yet my boot tread, the flat toe where I'd scuffed it against a curb last week, it was all there. Perfect, preserved, I whispered. He already knew. Scott didn't answer. He just backed away, slowly, eyes darting to the cliffs, the shadows, the horizon, like he expected the man to materialize from the very rock. I stood, legs unsteady. Why would he do this? I asked. What does he want? Scott was pale. Maybe not to hurt us, maybe just to mark us, like a claiming. Those words echoed in my head like thunder. A claiming. We turned and walked back to the ladder in silence. I didn't look over my shoulder. I didn't want to know if he was there again. I just focused on getting back to the car. One step after another. The trail was strangely easier on the way out, like the land was letting us go. Or maybe it was done with us. We didn't talk until we were in the car. I didn't start the engine right away. I just sat there, hands on the wheel, eyes on the cracked vinyl dashboard. Scott finally broke the silence. Do you think we gave him what he wanted? I don't know, I said, but we had given something. Our fear, our attention, our names, maybe. After that day, things calmed. No more dreams. No more motion alerts. No bruises. The feeling of being watched didn't vanish, but it softened, like something had shifted from interest to indifference. We moved a few months later. A new place. Bigger, brighter, fewer shadows. I stopped researching, burned the printouts, deleted the pictures, except for one. The blurry, zoomed-in photo from the trail. The first time we saw him. I kept it on an old USB drive, buried in a drawer. I don't know why. Maybe to remind myself it was real. Maybe because part of me knew it wasn't over. About a year after the hike, I got a letter. No return address. Postmarked from Santa Fe. Inside was a single photograph. Me, taken from behind. Standing on the Sankawai Trail, head slightly turned, just before the ladder. In the photo, I'm alone. Scott's nowhere in frame, but someone else is. In the far corner of the image, just visible in the rocks, a man is standing, shadowed, barefoot, watching. And written on the back in small, perfect block letters. See you again soon. I dropped the photo. It fluttered down like a leaf, landing face up on the hardwood floor. That grainy image staring back at me, my own body captured from behind, frozen in time, unaware, vulnerable, and him, always him. The weight of that photo pulled the air out of the room. It wasn't the message, those 4 words, though they were enough to twist my stomach. It was how it got here. How someone knew where to send it. How they took it in the first place. Because Scott took all the photos that day. I never stepped away from him. Not once. At least I thought I hadn't. I picked it up with trembling fingers and flipped it again, reading the writing one more time. See you again soon? The letters were etched into the paper like they'd been pressed with a scalpel. Not a pen. No ink smudge. No marker. Just carved into the glossy back. Scott was out when I found it. I waited for him to come home, sitting on the edge of the bed with the photo in my lap like it might burn through the blanket. When he finally walked through the door and saw my face, he didn't even ask. He just said, "It happened again, didn't it?" I nodded and handed it to him. His jaw clenched. Ow. He didn't speak for a long time. Just kept flipping it over in his hands like maybe if he looked at it from the right angle it would disappear. What does he want from us? He finally said. Quiet, bitter, I think. I hesitated, unsure if I even believed it myself. I think he wants to be remembered. The idea came from nowhere and everywhere. From Helen's words, from the old stories. From the silent stare we couldn't shake. He wasn't just a presence haunting the land. He was a witness, a sentinel, forgotten by time and tethered to memory. We'd looked into his face, acknowledged him, and that was enough. Now we were part of his story. Or maybe worse, he was part of ours. After that day, the feeling came back. Not constant. Sharp and sudden, like a cold draft in a sealed room. Sometimes I'd wake up and feel it, the weight of eyes in the dark. The sound of breathing when there wasn't another soul awake. Scott admitted he felt it too, but we stopped talking about it, like it was a ghost we were trying not to feed. Months passed, then a year. We didn't hike anymore. We moved again. No more New Mexico. We found a city, surrounded ourselves with people, with buildings and noise and streetlights. It helped, mostly. Till last week. I was walking home from work, cutting through an alley I've used dozens of times. It was dusk. It's a kind of light that turns everything to silhouette, and someone was standing at the end, leaning slightly, not moving. I stopped. My heart didn't just race, it froze, like my body knew before my brain could catch up. I stepped forward once, twice. The figure didn't shift. And then slowly it stepped backward, into the dark, gone. I ran the rest of the way home, didn't look back. Later, when I checked the apartment building's camera footage, the screen went black from 6:11 p.m. to 6:16 p.m. 5 minutes gone. Nothing. I didn't tell Scott this time. Just stared at the footage, at the way the timestamp glitched and jumped, and knew. He hadn't forgotten us. We tried to leave him behind in the dust of Sankawi, but he followed. He always follows. I thought I'd gotten used to the fear. Became a background hum, like the faint buzz of a faulty light bulb always there. But impossible to ignore. But after that alley, it shifted. The fear wasn't passive anymore. It was active. Stalking. It had legs, breath, and tension. And then the knocks started again. Always at 2:13 a.m., 3 slow, deliberate raps on the door. No more, no less. The first night, I shook Scott awake. We crept to the door together, armed with the camera app open and a kitchen knife I didn't remember grabbing. But when we looked through the peephole, nothing. No one. I opened the door with shaking hands and stepped out barefoot on cold concrete. Empty hall, no sound, no movement. The second night it happened again. Same time, same 3 knocks. I didn't wake Scott this time. I just lay there, heart pounding, gripping the edge of the sheets like they could hold me inside the world I wanted to believe, in the normal world. On the third night, I stood at the door before it happened. Just stood there in the dark, hand on the knob. Why watch the time change on my phone? 2:12, 2:13. Knock, knock, knock. I didn't open the door. I whispered, "What do you want?" No answer, of course. But then something new happened. A slip of paper slid under the door. I stared at it for what felt like forever before picking it up. It was torn notebook paper, edges frayed, smudged with something brownish dirt, I told myself. Just dirt. 3 words written in that same too clean, too sharp handwriting. You still see. I didn't sleep the rest of that night. The next morning, I booked a flight. One way, back to New Mexico. Scott didn't try to stop me. He understood in the way only someone who's lived inside the same nightmare can. "You really think going back will stop this?" he asked, as we sat in the airport parking garage, his hands gripping the wheel like he might crack it. "I don't think it matters anymore," I said, "but I need to see it. One more time. I need to know if I left something there, something still waiting." He nodded. "Don't go alone." I gave him a tired smile. I won't be alone. Because I wasn't. Not really. I'd never been alone since that first day on the trail. The Sankawi loop hadn't changed. It's the same rock-carved trail. The same silent breeze weaving between pinyon and juniper. The same sun-stained cliffs and soot-darkened caves. But it felt different now. The land didn't hum. It throbbed. Each step echoed. It wasn't just memory this time. It was recognition. It was like the mesa knew I'd come back. I didn't follow the full loop. I knew where I needed to go. The spot near the overlook just before the ladder. The place where those 2 footprints had been etched into stone. When I reached it, I stopped breathing. There were 3. A new one, carved beside mine, smaller, narrower, familiar. Scott's, the 3rd print, was unmistakable. Scott's tread distinctive, with the worn edge of his hiking boot and that tiny chunk missing from the heel. I remembered when it had torn. He'd tripped on a curb outside our old apartment last year. It was the kind of thing only I would notice. And yet here it was, etched into volcanic rock, as if it had been waiting here all along. I dropped to my knees, ran my fingers along the ridges. Cold, solid, permanent. It made no sense. We never stood here at the same time. We never walked in that direction. But something or someone had already written us into the stone. I backed away, suddenly lightheaded. The wind had picked up without warning. It pushed at me from the direction of the ladder, hot and dry, like a whisper blown straight from the mouth of the mesa itself. The air carried a weight now, as if the land had thickened with something unspoken. I wasn't afraid anymore, not in the way I had been. The fear had calcified into something else, resolve, maybe, or fatalism. I whispered aloud to no one. Why us? The rocks didn't answer. But I didn't expect them to. Instead, something shifted behind me, not the wind. Not the trees. Footsteps. Slow, measured. Heavy on the path behind the petroglyph wall. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. My body braced like it had been waiting for this moment my whole life. A figure emerged around the bend, just as I remembered him. Still barefoot, still silent. Still cloaked in that ill-fitting jacket like he'd stepped out of time and into my nightmare. He didn't stop walking. He came forward, slow and steady, until there were only 10 feet between us. I could see his face clearly now. The eyes not glowing, not hollow, just present. Watching, remembering. You followed me, I said. He didn't answer. You've always followed me. Still nothing. But there was no threat in his posture. No aggression. Just stillness, like a statue cut from bone and memory. And then he did something I never expected. He turned. He touched his own mark in the stone, pressed his palm flat against it, fingers splayed wide. Then he looked at me. For the first time, really looked at me. And I understood. He wasn't showing me the prints. He was showing me that he remembered. Every person who had seen him, every person who had feared him, fled from him, recognized him, he carried them. Somehow, in some way I didn't have words for, he was the memory. Bound not just to the trail, but to those who walked it, who truly saw it, saw him. We'd locked eyes. That's all it took. We had carried him home with us, not because he'd chosen to follow, but because we'd chosen to know him. His stare softened. And then, like smoke and heat waves, he began to fade, vanish, fade, his edges blurring like sand washing from a sculpture, his body collapsing into light and dust. And when he was gone, all that remained was his palm print, added beside the 3 footprints. A 4th mark, pressed deep into the stone. I stood there for a long time, watching the spot where he'd been. The wind slowly returned. A hawk cried high above the cliffs. The mesa exhaled. I didn't cry. I didn't run. I just whispered, I remember, and walked back down the trail, the ladder's rungs warmer than they had any right to be. I didn't look back once. Not when I descended the ladder, not when I reached the trailhead, and not when I passed the sign that warned hikers of the fragile, tough cliffs and ancient ruins beyond. I walked slowly, feeling every heartbeat in my chest, every dry scrape of wind across my cheeks. And when I reached the car, I stood beside it for a while, staring out at the mesa that had changed everything. I still couldn't explain it, not in any way that would make sense outside of that place. But I felt different, lighter, like some part of me that had been clenched tight for over a year had finally released. I didn't drive straight home. I checked into a small roadside motel just outside of Espanola, a place with flickering neon and thin towels and faded paintings of desert landscapes on the walls, the kind of place where no one asked questions. I showered until the water ran cold, dried off, and sat on the edge of the bed with my phone in my hand for nearly an hour before finally calling Scott. He picked up on the first ring. Kate, I went back, I said. I didn't realize I was crying until I heard it in my own voice. What happened? He was there. Silence. Then, did he follow you? No, I said. I think he'd let go. Scott exhaled, long and slow. Jesus, are you okay? I paused, really searching myself for an answer. I think so. We moved again after that. Not out of fear this time, but because we needed a clean place to begin. A space untouched by the things we couldn't see. Our new place sits near a creek, surrounded by trees, but the good kind. The kind that hummed with cicadas in the summer and turned gold and amber in fall. The kind that feel alive but not watchful. I won't talk about it much, not directly. But sometimes when we're sitting on the back porch and the wind gets still, I catch Scott watching the tree line. I know he remembers too. There are nights I still wake up at 2:13 a.m., my heart thudding, breath held, but there are no knocks. No letters, no shadows, just silence. I kept the photo, the one of me on the trail. It's in a locked drawer tucked behind old birthday cards and tax forms. I don't look at it anymore. I don't need to. It's burned into my memory. As for the footprints, I sometimes wonder if they're still there. Maybe more have been added since. Maybe others have met him. Maybe someone else is being watched even now, tracing the same path we did, feeling that same invisible tether being drawn tight around their ankles. But I don't need to know. I don't need to go back, because I already carry it with me. That moment on the mesa, that look in his eyes, that promise etched into stone and silence. You saw me. You see me. And somehow, by remembering, I let him rest. A year passed, then another. I tried to live like it never happened. I really tried. I buried it deep under layers of routine. Morning coffee, work emails, trips to the store, the occasional movie night. Normal things, clean things. Things without footprints or whispers or doors opening by themselves. And most of the time, it worked. But there's a strange ache that comes with surviving something unexplained. A kind of loneliness. Not because you're isolated, but because the people around you can't understand. Even if you told them every detail, showed them the photo, walked them through the trail itself, they just smile and nod and file it under weird or coincidence, or maybe even delusion. But for me and for Scott, it was real. I didn't go back to Sankoe, not physically, but I started dreaming about it again. Not the nightmares, not the eyes in the dark, or the man beside the ladder. No bruises when I woke, no shadows at the window. Out of these dreams were still. I'd be walking the mesa alone, always in the golden hour, with the red light pouring through the branches and the sound of dry grass swaying in the wind. I never saw anyone in these dreams. It's no figure, no threat, just the footprints. Dozens of them, leading across the path, curling around the rocks, vanishing into the brush. Some matched mine, some didn't. But the message was clear. I wasn't the only one. One night, after another one of those dreams, I opened my email and found a message from an address I didn't recognize. No subject line. Inside was a single sentence. Did you ever go back to the trail? I saw him too. Attached was a photo. Grainy. Taken from behind a juniper tree. A man, barefoot, standing on the Sankawi Ridge. And something caught in my throat as I looked closer, because the image, though new, felt exactly like the one I'd received years ago. Same composition, same distance, same posture. But it wasn't of me this time. It was someone else. A new woman, alone. Frozen in place on the path, and he was behind her, closer than he'd ever been to me. Watching, marking, claiming. I stared at the email for a long time before I closed the laptop and walked out onto our porch. The wind stirred the trees in gentle waves. Somewhere far off, an owl called once, and then went quiet. I looked up at the sky, exhaled slowly, and whispered the only thing I could. He's still there, and he always will be. Because some places remember, and some things don't fade, they follow. Looking back, I should have known something was off that afternoon. Our family gatherings were always loud, with cousins running wild and old aunts arguing over potato salad recipes in the kitchen. That day, the house was packed with laughter, music, and the thick smell of barbecue drifting in from the yard. I was refilling drinks in the dining room when I first noticed him. He stood near the photo wall, hands clasped awkwardly in front of a collage of faded graduation pictures. At first I assumed he was a friend of someone, as maybe an in-law or a +1, because family parties always seem to attract stray guests. But when I went to say hello, he smiled too wide, showed a little too much teeth. His handshake was cold and damp, his grip lingering just a second past comfortable. "Which side of the family are you from?" I asked. He paused, then looked around, eyes darting over the crowd. "Oh, I'm with the cousins," he said, not naming names, not offering any details. He drifted through the party after that, hovering near quiet corners or watching the clusters of family from a distance. Sometimes I caught him listening hard to conversations, eyes narrowing, as if trying to absorb every secret. Every time I checked, he was somewhere else talking to my little cousin on the porch, wandering the hallway lined with family portraits, standing just inside the kitchen door, pretending to look busy with his phone. The afternoon sunlight faded to gold, the room growing soft and dreamy, and yet, wherever he moved, I felt a chill, like a shadow had slipped in with him and settled over the house. Even when people talked to him, it never felt natural. "Uncle Ray," tried drawing him into a circle of uncles swapping fishing stories, but the stranger only smiled politely and nodded, asking questions that didn't quite fit, like when someone tries to pass for local in a town they've never visited. "So, when was the last time you all did this?" he asked, voice flat, eyes darting to the back door as if calculating a way out. Later, I saw him on the porch with my little cousin Eli, looked uncomfortable, leaning away as the man asked softly about his school and what time the family usually left the house. When I interrupted, the man stiffened, quickly changing the subject to barbecue recipes, as if nothing odd had happened. A cold unease began to ripple through me, and when I tried to whisper to my mom about him, she shrugged. "Probably someone's old college friend, honey. Don't worry." But the more I watched, the less he belonged. He never laughed at the family jokes, never joined in on the games or stories, just hovered, always listening, always watching. As dusk crept across the yard and the crickets started up, I realized he hadn't eaten or even taken a sip from the offered lemonade. He just traced slow, silent paths from room to room, eyes scanning faces, fingers twitching at his sides. And once the sun dipped behind the trees, people began to notice him more, glancing his way and whispering the same question I'd asked myself. Who exactly invited that man? The mood of the party subtly shifted, the undercurrent of suspicion spreading as more eyes lingered on him. Quiet curiosity mixing with anxiety no one wanted to voice aloud. I noticed conversations drifting around the edges of rooms, people murmuring in cautious tones. "Who's he with? Didn't see him come in, did you?" Someone tried to text the family group chat for answers, but no one could pin down even a plausible connection. As twilight deepened and fireflies began blinking in the yard, the stranger's wandering grew more deliberate. He traced the length of the hallway, pausing to run his finger over the glass of a photograph from my parents' wedding. I watched from the kitchen as he hovered in doorways, listening to pockets of laughter and old stories, but never laughing, never showing even a flicker of recognition or nostalgia, just that pale, fixed smile. An odd quiet fell over the house. The television in the living room played quietly over snippets of conversations cut short every time he entered. Eli, clearly unsettled, clung to his mother's side now, eyes darting from the stranger to me. Then, without warning, the man slipped into the backyard, past the patio's circle of family, and into the darkening edge of the garden. I saw him pause, scanning the silhouettes beneath the trees, as if waiting for something or someone. For one strange, bracing moment, it felt less like he was an intruder among us, and more like we'd wandered into his space. Our party, the awkward intrusion. Someone called out half-heartedly, "Hey, you need directions back in?" But he only smiled, that too wide grin, and drifted further from the porch light's glow, swallowed by the shadows beneath the old oak tree. The uneasy silence hung heavily in his absence. For a moment, no one moved, some still craning their necks toward the window, as if expecting the stranger to reappear under the porch light. I felt my own heartbeat thudding in my chest, the evening's warmth suddenly suffocating. Finally, Uncle Ray mustered the courage to step outside. I followed, my hands shaking as we scanned the garden, flashlights zigzagging over shadows and the glint of glassy-eyed garden gnomes. But there was no sign of him, no footsteps in the dewy grass, no figure slipping through the hedges, nothing but a faint patch of trampled lawn near the back fence. We circled the yard in silence before returning inside, the party now thoroughly deflated. My mother locked the doors, my aunt checked windows twice, and the kids clustered together in the hallway, wide-eyed and whispering. Someone called out into the darkness, hopeful but useless, "You coming back in?"
Ah!
But only the sirring of crickets replied. We never saw the man leave, never heard a car or gate. It was as if he'd melted back into the night, taking that cold tension with him. For the rest of the evening, nobody quite relaxed. We tried to return to laughter and music, but it all felt strained, brittle, as if the house itself was waiting for answers. Weeks later, no one claimed to have brought the stranger, and no neighbor recognized his description. He never turned up in photos, either we checked, and in every candid shot, he was just out of frame, a blur in the periphery or a shape lost in the shadowy background. Sometimes when the family gets together now, we'll glance toward the edge of the yard as dusk falls, half expecting to see a pale face in the trees. And every gathering since, the question hangs in the air, unanswered. Who was the unknown guest? And what exactly was he looking for? The uneasy silence hung heavily in his absence. For a moment, no one moved, some still craning their necks toward the window, as if expecting the stranger to reappear under the porch light. I felt my own heartbeat thudding in my chest, the evening's warmth suddenly suffocating. Finally, Uncle Ray mustered the courage to step outside. I followed, my hands shaking as we scanned the garden, flashlights zigzagging over shadows and the glint of glassy-eyed garden gnomes. But there was no sign of him, no footsteps in the dewy grass, no figure slipping through the hedges, nothing but a faint patch of trampled lawn near the back fence. We circled the yard in silence before returning inside, the party now thoroughly deflated. My mother locked the doors, my aunt checked windows twice, and the kids clustered together in the hallway, wide-eyed and whispering. Someone called out into the darkness, hopeful but useless, "You coming back in?"
Ah!
But only the sirring of crickets replied. We never saw the man leave, never heard a car or gate. It was as if he'd melted back into the night, taking that cold tension with him. For the rest of the evening, nobody quite relaxed. We tried to return to laughter and music, but it all felt strained, brittle, as if the house itself was waiting for answers. Weeks later, no one claimed to have brought the stranger, and no neighbor recognized his description. He never turned up in photos, either we checked, and in every candid shot, he was just out of frame, a blur in the periphery or a shape lost in the shadowy background. Sometimes when the family gets together now, we'll glance toward the edge of the yard as dusk falls, half expecting to see a pale face in the trees. And every gathering since, the question hangs in the air, unanswered. Who was the unknown guest? And what exactly was he looking for?